Everybody, welcome to the show. This month we talk about the phases of the economy, how to prepare for a recession, but most importantly, how to not get burned in the process. There are opportunities out there, and you don't want to take the wrong one. Lots of underwriting, lots of education. That's the biggest point, and I look forward to you guys learning some from our contributions here. Thanks for joining.
At the end of the day, you have to buy it right so that you don't end up upside down when we hit the bottom of the curve, and from a market perspective, as it were.
So as an investor, you should be all over educating yourself about the recession, what it means, and looking for opportunities. People will crucify you for it, but they're not the ones who are going to do the work to try and turn that, dilapidated hotel in the Poconos where the owners are in jail into something cool that is needed.
Welcome to the REI Partners Meetup. We're your hosts, Matt Morrow and Richard Clark. This is a place where knowledge is shared, friends collaborate, as we help each other to succeed in both our real estate and personal goals. We are a group of like-minded individuals from across the country who are here to help and support each other. Investors, realtors, entrepreneurs, and many others contribute to providing diverse and practical content for our events, especially our mentors who enjoy helping new and experienced investors in their journeys. Thanks for joining. We hope you enjoy the show and encourage you to bring others who may find value as we invest in our collective future. All right, everybody. I think we're live. Thanks for joining. This is May 2022. Not a huge call this time, but we have a lot of people calling in later and going to watch the video at the end. But REI Partners has become quite an awesome organization we have going here. Rich and myself, about 70 people part of the group. A lot of people interacting on a daily, if not weekly basis with what we have going here. And this month we have a cool presentation I put together about preparing for a recession. So just to make sure everybody's educated and to be prepared for what's coming. You never really know what's coming as far as the economy, but you can do your best to educate and prepare yourself because we've never been through this before. Some people have been through real estate cycles. A lot of the investors on the call haven't, but it's an important thing to learn. So Rich, do you have anything that you want to bring up before we get started?
No, I'm good, man. I think it's important for us, though, to have a pretty good understanding of the market and what's happening. I did notice some softening. I know that you have as well. So in looking at what's happening in the market, what phase we're in right now, I think it's important for everybody to know. And it just means more opportunity or different opportunities for us. So that's all I really want to say to start this out. And then if you don't mind, I'll chime in certain areas where you're talking about specific topics in the market.
Okay, perfect. I apologize if you're squeaking in the background. That is squeaking. It is a dog toy. I have a very active puppy in the background, so he'll probably join. So the goal for today is to talk about the recession and various forms of how it will affect real estate. Through the recession, the economy coming, whenever that happens, regardless of what happens, it's going to happen without any of our control. So you just have to learn about it and be prepared. I'm going to talk about inflation, what the rate of the Fed is, and the forecast of the market for at least where we are. Everyone's going to have a different market where they're calling in from, and then various ways to invest and ways to avoid problems. So here's the various phases of a recession. It starts in the beginning after a recession happens in the recovery phase, and it goes up the curve here as things start to grow. You have negative rental growth, then below inflation rental growth, and then rents start to rise. You can see the red arrow that I put here. You are here. We are either here or up between 9 and 10. Because we are having rent growth in all markets, but there is still a shortage of homes, both for purchase and for rent. So we're not at equilibrium yet. Once that happens, then things start to change. This is kind of a steep drop off, as most recessions have been. The demand for it goes away very quick. But we're not really sure how this one's going to play out because there is such a demand for rental homes and for purchase homes. This top quadrant here between 11 and 14, we're not sure exactly how that's going to shake out yet, but I think it's going to be softening, where values are going to stay stagnant, maybe regress a little bit, but there's not going to be a ton of negative or depreciation because that demand is still there.
Yeah, if I can comment a few things on that, Matt.
Sure.
You know, with the, I know you're going to talk about inflation and the rising of the rates, but just as a point of understanding is that whereas the Fed raises the rates, credit usually begins to, well, it can loosen a little bit because banks want to lend, but at the same time, the pool of candidates that qualify for that lending goes way down. So that's going to be, that's something that's already beginning to happening, and I attribute that to the softening of the market, you know. And like you say, when we reach that, right now rents are pretty high, but the inventory for rentable properties is still quite low. So I'm not so sure that we're going to reach an equilibrium point anytime this year, but I do think that we might, we're going to definitely see some flattening of the curve, if I can use that expression, throughout the remainder of this year from a market perspective, so that we're not going to see the crazy high prices for properties. We'll see a little bit of that still, but I don't think it'll be across the board. But then we're going to see things begin to change. Probably, I would say, after the midterm elections, we'll know a little bit better by then, because real estate moves slower than any other market. So it takes time. So we're not going to fall off the cliff tomorrow. It's going to take time, and when the time comes, we'll begin to see those changes take place slowly. We just got to pay attention.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the fact that it moves slowly should be a comfort factor for everyone on the call and everybody listening, because anything that moves fast can move fast up, it can move fast down. There's a reason real estate moves slowly, and that should be, it's definitely a comfort for me being involved in it. So what do you think about that, Rich?
I'm sorry, I was muted. Say again, Matt.
The fact that it moves slowly is a good thing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
If you have an investment vehicle
Absolutely.
that moves fast, that's that could be good if you're on the upswing, but also bad if you're on the downswing with all these Bitcoin guys. Things have absorbed really quickly. So yeah, I think real estate is very stable because of the speed at which it moves. Just want to say, hey, Chris, thanks for joining.
Right.
Yeah, hey, thanks for
coming. Real estate is good. Hey, Chris.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
All right. So the first phase of a recession is not the phase that we're in right now. This phase would be essentially 2010, if you could put yourself in that year, or in the past prior recessions. This is when you're just coming out of the recession. Recovery, it's just starting. There's lots of foreclosures, lots of availability, lots of vacancies, lots of opportunity here. But it's also a very difficult time to predict what's going to happen. So depending on what you're looking at, whether it be single family, multifamily, vacation, commercial, things like that, the beginning phase of any recessionary loop is going to be you figuring out what you want to be your long-term goal, and you want to stay in your lane. So once the market starts to bounce back, you're going to capitalize on everything you did during phase one. But getting in at phase four, which is right now, it can be kind of risky depending on how you get in. Second phase is expansion. So this would be like the early 2010s, somewhere in there. Things are starting to boom. You have lots of good job growth, lots of good expansion as far as building, barring any crazy scenarios like COVID, where you have supply chain issues and the lack of affordable housing to be built. The expansion phase is really where there's a balance of supply and demand. Things are coming up. There's equal supply for the demand, maybe a little bit less because you're still in the growth phase. But this is a really, really good time to be, a flourishing nation, as you will, because it's going to be a good time for you and everyone else to start buying reasonably priced properties. Nothing overpriced, but nothing out of foreclosure. Although those things do always exist, this is the time where rent also starts to increase. So expansion is a good time for you to get in and start to rent out the places that you bought during the first phase. This is kind of where we're coming to now. Hyper supply we're not there yet. We're at the end of phase 2, in my opinion. And Rich, if you please chime in and kind of give your thoughts as we go here. But hyper supply is really what causes the recessionary start in real estate, because lots of homes come on the market. We are in an opposite, we are in phase 3, but that's why real estate is going to continue to be a strong investment vehicle through this recession versus other investments, because hyper supply is not here while the rest of the inflation is happening. There is a massive deficit of affordable housing, or housing in general. Regardless of affordable, you can put a single family home on Zillow for $2,500 a month and it'll rent tomorrow. It's ridiculous. So there is not hyper supply, but there is recession starting. So there's all these variables to consider. This is kind of a unique piece to be at. What does it look like in the end? Someone always still needs a house to live in. So, what do you think about that, Rich?
Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. Here's the thing about the hyper supply side of things. At this point, we don't have the hyper supply because we don't have the developers building the houses out there. We have the supply chain affecting the cost of lumber and other building materials, and that has put a further crunch on the availability of properties that are out there. So you have the decline of the building. This is the first time, actually, I think, in our history where we don't have the number of houses being built that would be expected for this time in this market period. So that's going to again put upward pressure on existing homes. Prices will continue to be a bit higher than they otherwise would be. But it's also going to mean that, how do we reach hyper supply when no one's building anything? So how that's going to affect things, I'm not entirely sure. Look, I'm not an expert at this. I don't pretend to be, but I'm a pretty decent analyst, and as I think Matt is as well. We'll see what happens with the hyper supply phase, but I think that we may end up with it may end up being skipped in some way, because at some point equilibrium is going to come from the increases in inflation, the cost of living and everything, and the job market is going to be a factor as well. So COVID really whacked everything up, but and because of that and the impact of the supply chain, we're in some interesting times for sure.
That's a really good point. Builders are not building. Sellers are not really starting to sell. So the fact that there's still a demand for this makes real estate an extremely safe investment. That's just my opinion. I'm sure people could argue it, but everybody on the call would share the same opinion as to why, because it's a commodity in need, and it will always be. So if you keep it, if you keep your real estate through the hyper supply phase, you have to be in this for the long haul, because once this phase passes, you have the next phase, which is the actual recession. I'm sure anybody who had investments in Baltimore, anywhere around there in like the 2005 to 2010 range, knows exactly what we're talking about, and maybe some other areas too. There are so many buildings vacant. I was in Detroit the other day. Buildings vacant, stores vacant, warehouses vacant. Other than a core piece of the city, it is very sad when the big motor companies pulled out. Even though they're coming in, you can have localized recessions like Detroit, or you can have countrywide or global-wide recessions like we're seeing right now. Going through phase 4 can be very, very painful. And if you are over leveraged you have too much in the form of loans against the property or other things, your cash flow is going to be the only thing that keeps you afloat during a recession. So underwriting your deals when you're buying them, making sure the numbers work for you, regardless of what the numbers are for other people, make sure they work for you is super important. Because when the recession comes, not if, but when the recession comes and you hold that real estate through phase 4, you need to be able to weather the storm or be prepared to get rid of it as a discount. This can be also a very good time to buy properties in areas that are going to be redeveloped. Buying something in Center City, Allentown 12 years ago would have been the best thing you could have ever done if you knew that it was going to be redeveloped. However, there's still places that are not, and you have to do your research or be the one driving the fight to make it all happen. And that's where most of the money is made.
Yeah, another thing I'll add to that, Matt, is you got the 3 basic classes or groups of properties. You got your Class A's, your rich and famous, the wealthy, the new developments, those types of properties that are for homeowners looking to move into the area into something new. Then you have the Class Bravo properties, or B, which are the middle of the road. That's your bread and butter, your lunch pail Joe type properties, which is what everyone's going to want. But then you got the Class C properties. And what I'm seeing, at least in some areas of the country, at least up here, is that there's a lot of effort being made to redevelop some of those Class C areas. The Class C areas are like the hood, okay? It's places where you don't want to live. Let's be honest. There are people that, are going to live in places where they can. And some of these places in Class C neighborhoods are not very good. The schools aren't good, or the shopping is, it's a problem. So, but I'm seeing a lot of that redevelopment effort coming in. So that might help reach equilibrium in terms of the hyper accessibility phase that you just talked about before the recession hit. So we'll see, though.
All right. So after the recession phase, this is kind of what we're all talking about right now: inflation. What is it? Why does it matter? I know that most people on the call right now understand what it is, but the real nitty gritty about inflation is just the purchasing power of your money. What does it mean to you? And what does it mean in a large scale? As inflation rises, and you can see the graph here, inflation rates going back to 2018, inflation has been between 2 and 3% on average. Right after COVID started, inflation dropped to nearly 0, and that was done on purpose because they needed to keep the economy propped up somehow. And then as the next few years happen, all the way up till now, this is the most current graph. It was 8.5% back in February, March, and then April is at the very end there. Inflation is well over 10% in most of the country. Arizona's at 15 right now, and that was current as of 2 days ago. It's an astronomical change in the cost of everything. This is your buying power. The higher the number, the lower your buying power, which is why if you're borrowing money, you're going to pay a lot to do so. There's a lot of people having cash reserves ready to pounce on whatever good opportunities, but it's not going to be a feeding frenzy of foreclosures. That's not happening because there are still lines of buyers lined up to buy anything from multifamily to commercial to single family homes, purely because of the lack of supply right now. So until that supply goes out, so these people get pushed through the weeds and they no longer have to fight for homes, we're going to see this to continue to rise. As inflation starts to level off, the Fed, which is the next slide, is going to maybe cool off their rate hikes because things are starting to level, and then it all resets. And actually, there's a gentleman just joining the call right now who could probably give us a very good explanation. Hey, George, how's it going, buddy? Maybe he's not up yet. Any questions about inflation and what it is, especially to an investor? It's just your ability to really lock down a property if you're going to be using something, and the costs associated with rising utilities, taxes, everything you have as a landlord is going to be more expensive. Your taxes will go up. They're not free. Your utilities are going to go up. Everybody probably got a letter from PP&L and Med in the Eastern PA region lately. Your gas price is going to go up. Your natural gas, your oil, anything you use, propane, it's just going to keep going up and up and up. And that's inflation, which means the cost of ownership goes up, has to be passed on to someone because it's a business, and that's the tenants. And then it just goes around robin. The Fed is kind of a pointless entity without interest rates. The Federal Reserve is their job to set the price of borrowing money. Without that, there would be no benchmark to put on an interest rate anywhere. The higher the interest rates, the lower the interest of people to borrow that money is. The lower the interest rate, the more people are going to want to borrow that money. So the Fed is really steering the interest rate by setting a benchmark. What's happening now is the Fed realizes that things are kind of out of control. They need to start setting targets, and you'll hear this in the news, and it's all over the news now, and any news source will show their own version of this, but in reality, this graph is the only thing that matters. Back in the 80s, interest rate was high. Back in the late 80s, started to drop. Early 2000s, after 9/11, boom, they went right to the bottom because they want to encourage the economy to keep, producing. Starts raising a little bit, and then in 2000 teens, it was basically nothing. Started creeping up over the last few years. COVID hits again. It's cyclical. They want to keep the economy moving, which is why they drop the rate during certain times. However, right now, it is on a cycle that is almost uncontrollable, and that's why the Fed rate is going to start coming up. We will start to see hikes in everything from interest rates in homes, cars, all over, and it's going to get pretty high.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I
Rich,
think,
what were you
Matt, I was going to say, Matt, I think that, one of the things that the Federal Reserve has always done, this is just government in general, they overshoot. They're going to raise the rates too far as possible, okay? They raise the rates too far, and that can throw us into a recession as well.
And then what happens when they go too far? Now, what's the next step?
Well, right. When they go too far, then the rates get too high, and then by the time they figure out that they went too far and they go to lower the rates, the economy is usually already in the recession deeply. And it's going to take a couple of years for it to come out. Remember, when the Fed raises the rate, the impact isn't immediate. It's immediately felt in the sense of lending, borrowing money from banks, because they raise the rates almost in line with when the Fed raises the rates, but they don't lower them as fast either. So I think there's going to be definitely some deepening of the recession as a result of the Fed's delay and the bank's delays in correcting the rates to where people will begin to buy again. In the meantime, though, people will attempt to try and save cash and try to find other places to put their money. But for those that don't have any cash or are living paycheck to paycheck, it's going to be a big impact to them. That means that it's going to affect the renters. So being able to raise the rents on an annual basis may be a problem.
Yeah, that's a good point. You keep your rents up with current, and now all of a sudden your numbers work. But if the general population, the people who are renting from you, do not have the same increase in income, which is not likely, that could be kind of a double-edged sword. It might be good for now, but you're putting them in a position to be set up for failure. And that's something that all of us should be really considerate of. Rents are an important piece, and they also have to rise. But if the general population and the people who are renting from you don't also have the same appreciation in their incomes, this is going to be a problem, because they are going to start defaulting. You've committed them, and they've committed their funds to be able to pay you. And all of a sudden, you're putting yourself in a really weird position. So the Fed rate indirectly, well, it actually directly affects everything, from interest rates to your ability to keep, maintain, and do anything with your money, unless you're going to buy in cash.
Good point, Matt.
So PowerPoint's not cooperating. There we go. All right, here's the way you can start to protect yourself. Protecting yourself and protecting your investments are one and the same. Once you get to the point where you have corporations, you have, shell companies and all this stuff, you're protecting the whole pie. But the beginning steps are aggressively analyze your returns and expectations. If you don't know what you want from an investment, and you don't know what kind of return on investment you want, you don't know what kind of cash flow goals you have for each particular purchase, now is not the time to buy. If you're just getting into it to get into it, very, very poor timing. Do not make a mistake and fall flat on your face in your first few deals. Make yourself familiar with all the terms, get comfortable with the returns you want versus what kind of returns you'd get in another investment vehicle like the stock market or digital coins or something like that. And overanalyze everything. Not analysis paralysis, but make sure you have your, I need at least a 10% cash on cash return, and I need at least a 300-month cash flow from a single family home. Do not budge on that. Doesn't matter what the purchase price is, doesn't matter what the seller needs, doesn't matter what you need. Your goals are your goals, and they have to be that way. If you compromise to make the deal work, you're probably going to have an issue when things start to change. Another way to protect yourself is increase liquidity. Having cash reserves ready to go is never a bad thing. However, having cash reserves during an inflationary time is money that's losing money every day if it's not deployed. However, having money in a bank account making less than inflation is still better than having money in a bad investment where you lose your ass every month. Make a good choice. Increase liquidity, keep the money around, listen to the dog in the background making squeaky noises. Third piece is educating yourself and learning the ideal location for your investments. The best thing you could do during times like this is educate, educate, educate. COVID, most of us took the time to learn and educate yourself on things you don't know. Learn a new skill, learn different side of investing, network with people. Your brain is your most powerful tool. Don't put your money into something bad just to get in, but teach yourself everything you possibly can so that when that opportunity does come, you know if you could take advantage of it or not. You should know right away. And the location is also important. As you get bigger into different investing geography pieces, like Melissa was on earlier, she's in the Caribbean right now, she's building homes down there, that's her location. Or Key, he's investing all over the country, but he lives in Los Angeles, he's buying units up in Columbus, he just did another one in another state, big building, 60 units, and his location is no longer Los Angeles. At some point you have to move out of that, but he has the education and he knows his goals and he has the cash available. He has the first 3 steps nailed down, so when something does come up, he can hop on a plane, fly to Shreveport, Louisiana, look at the 12 unit and buy it. No questions asked. And lastly, diversification. Having money in one thing is always bad. All the eggs in one basket term is very, very literal. However, in real estate, it's different kinds of real estate, different markets of real estate, not necessarily only single family homes or only in one zip code. Diversification holds a lot of different traits. So between those 4 things, this will keep you safe and out of trouble. However, you need to know your own limits. Rich, I'd love you to kind of elaborate on that a little bit. I know you have more experience there.
Oh, you mean on diversification or the education part? Which one?
Well, all of it. Are there any other items that I missed or things that might be more appropriate to include here versus other slides?
Well, no, I really think you covered it. Educating yourself and understanding your location. You don't have to live where, and I think you just touched on it, you don't have to live where you invest, but you have to understand and know where you're investing. The economies and the markets that are where your properties are going to be. As far as diversification goes, I do think that it is, as you say, having all your eggs in one basket. I would say in real estate, you can be all in real estate, but just don't be all in one type of real estate. So not all single family homes, not all, apartment buildings, although I think apartment buildings are definitely one of the best things to be in terms of a recessionary period, because people are going to always have have to have a place to live, and rents are going to generally be cheaper in apartments than they will be in houses. But yeah, I think that you should always analyze what you're getting from your investments and just try to stick to your guns in terms of what you know you need, but just build in a little bit of extra just in case when things turn bad, that you're still making the money you need to make, and know your carrying cost. Know what it costs you to carry that property if by chance no one's in it, and can you afford to do it? You know?
Hey, Rich, I just sent you a message there. Could you cover this next slide? I got to run off book.
Yeah, I just saw something. So protecting your portfolio and your liquidity. I think the first thing to do here is you got to know what the, how are you set up? Are you running a business or are you just investing willy-nilly for yourself? Or, is it a real business? So you need to have that LLC or corporation already set up and have the amount of monies that you're going to be getting from your investments poured into those companies. As Matt says here, there are many ways a real estate investor can protect their portfolio, but I think first having that entity is the one way to do that. You got to have an entity to put your liability in. That's basically what you have the entity for. You want to maximize that cash flow because that's how you make your money, obviously, right? But even when property values do decline or something happens, you need to be protected personally from the incursions of those problems, so that you're not coming out of your own pocket to solve them. Increase rents to market rate if you haven't done so already. Yeah, you can for the most part until such a time as you really can't. Every renter will always say that they're moving out, when you go to increase the rent. In most cases, they don't, because they know what it's going to cost them to move out, as well as in time and money to try to get into another place, and they don't want to make that move. And no one loves moving. So, but keep raising the rates, maybe not as much or as aggressively as you might have in the past, but just keep raising them because your expenses are going to continue to go up. And then the second strategy is to reduce your debt load. Obviously, you want to reduce your debt down to zero if possible. You don't want to carry much in the way of debt. Investors can buy properties in one of two ways: either pay cash, which is usually always the best way, it keeps the numbers simple, or finance for leverage purposes. And so if a property is going to be leveraged, that means you can buy more properties, but it also means more liabilities, more expense, and the numbers are a little bit more complicated. But at the end of the day, you have to buy it right so that you don't end up upside down when we hit the bottom of the curve, and from a market perspective, as it were. So it's a good time to refinance into lower interest rates if you can. If you already got a good interest rate, understand that if rates go really, really high, that it is very possible that banks can invoke rule, I believe it's called rule paragraph 19, which is the means by which they can call the loan due. They don't have to call the loan due just because you do something. They can call the loan due because they're not making enough money and the interest rate is too high. I spoke with a investor friend of mine who's very well experienced in this, and he had some friends in some pretty high places within Wells Fargo, for example, and they will unilaterally just call a swath of loans due that have lower interest rates, usually like a 5 or 6 or 8 point spread between what the current rate is and what they had financed those properties for. I've seen that happen. So just got to be aware of that. But if you can pay down your debts, if you're leveraged and you can do that, then that's a great way to go. And that way, when the recession hits, you have the equity to cover that, at least for now. Okay, and that'll last for usually a year or two, maybe even a little bit longer, but generally it doesn't go past a few years. All right. So, all right, Matt, you back?
Yes, sir.
All righty.
So we talked before about analyzing expectations. This slide is really meant for the phases. If we were in the beginning of phase one, before the recession comes, that's when the banks really want to get aggressive with lending. That's not the case now. Things are on the back end of this. Banks are very, very aggressive with underwriting. The rates are on the up. However, they still want to lend, but not to 2008 standards. You have all this money out there that's now more expensive to get for the same deals. We're going to see buyers start to dry up. We're going to see investors using creative financing to avoid using money from banks. What I see happening, I'm sure you guys would agree, cash purchases leveraged through private money or private capital is going to be very, very high in the next few years because it's going to be better than working with a bank. And again, a savvy investor is always going to consider the risk and the yield when investing before recession. So there's all of these things to consider. Anything on that, Rich?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Liquidity's king when it comes to being prepared. It gives you ultimate flexibility. It gives you flexibility to sit and stay, give you flexibility to buy what you want, but it also can give you the opportunity to buy something bad. Liquidity paired with analyzation is really the ultimate tool here. You want to be educated, you want to analyze, and you want to have the liquid available to do it. You might still need some leverage for each deal. You might need a loan, might need a private note from somebody, but real estate is always a liquid asset class because you can buy and sell it easily. It's a commodity that is tangible. It's not like Dogecoin that disappears overnight. It's not like a stock or a mutual fund where you got to go through a certain process. It can be hard to get money out of real estate unless you're investing in like a REIT or something like that, where you are purely the capital investor. But the nice thing about liquidity is it doesn't have to come in the form of cash in a bank account. You can increase liquidity by pulling equity out of something in real estate. That does come at a cost in the form of interest rates, but it's a very flexible asset when it comes to getting money. Right now, people who have high relative liquidity compared to other investors are going to be more successful as long as they make the choices that they're educated. Where to invest? This is the crystal ball question. Anybody is going to tell you what they think is the best based on their experience. So Rich and I are going to do the same. Multifamily, single family, it's all stable, secured, and in need. Where to put your money is really based on not what you want, but what's going to be the best long-term investment to protect your money. Now, all of us have different things that we invest in. And I know Chris just got on the call here. He's starting to look into vacation rentals. That's what he likes to invest in, or he's looking to invest in. But right now, he's a multifamily, single family. Where to invest is purely what account and what broker to put your money with where you're not going to lose money. We're all concerned about preserving cash right now, not about super high returns. Historically, multifamily is the best return because it spreads out your exposure over multiple doors in the same building. However, there's lots of good arguments against that. For the sake of this conversation, though, multifamily and multi-family office or industrial buildings are the one we'll just talk about. There are other good ways, but there are some things that you really should consider not putting your money into. Diversifying is one thing we talked about earlier in the slideshow. You really want to safeguard not just the type of investment you're doing, not just real estate. The type of real estate and the location is also a form of diversification. If you have all of your homes in a market of Eastern Pennsylvania, and then you throw one up in San Diego, that could be a good deal. But are you going to be able to adequately manage it? And will it work to your expectations. So there are different ways to diversify outside of the actual real estate buildings. Real estate investment trusts, the REITs, you have different funds, different stocks. However, I personally would not advise any of those. But real estate itself is going to be your absolute best bet. From single family, multifamily, industrial, commercial, whatever it happens to be, just do your research and make sure the numbers work for you. But keep them all out in different areas so that if, a hospital or a major employer of a town leaves, all of your cash flow doesn't leave with it. Has anybody experienced that? No? All right. The safer bets, multifamily, multi-tenant, because it spreads out your asset or spreads your asset throughout various payers. You have various forms of income. However, these kind of buildings are notoriously a different payer set than if you were to have a nice single family brick ranch that, is a nurse and a doctor living there. So there's ups and downs, but you're spreading your exposure among different tenants. Rich, you've had a lot of experience recently with exploding the single family rental market. Now, there's a really good business model for that. But as long as what you're doing is something that you're comfortable with and you're educated and you're meeting your returns, you're increasing your liquidity while you're doing so, that's all that matters. For the sake of this presentation, though, safe bet is spread your exposure over more payers. That's
Right.
just my personal belief. Good.
No, I think that's correct, because it really boils down to value per square foot, right? When you have multiple people living in a single structure for which you have to cover some expenses, you can find that you're going to get more money. The challenge is making sure that you don't have high expenses as a result of that profitability. In other words, make sure the building's up to snuff, everything's working, there are no problems, you don't have any troubled tenants. If you have any troubled tenants, get them out and get tenants that's not going to give you trouble, because that's a burden on your management services. So whether you're using a property management company or you're managing it yourself, no investor wants to deal with problems. They just want to collect the money.
It could also be a negative to the property and condition.
Yeah. Yeah, property conditions are important. And, just remember, all the rental laws that I've seen in various states are very much oriented towards the tenant, not towards the landlord. So just make sure everything is good. And if you have a good multifamily that you're clipping coupons from, then, hey, that's the way to go. Keep doing it. Get another one.
George, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a quick question. It was regarding the type of property, was kind of getting a little bit more granular, like A type property, B type, C type. Which one would you say would be more, I guess, recession proof? Because I know the lower you go, I know you're technically taking on more risk when you're getting into, lower income kind of properties, but you get a bigger reward. So I didn't know if there was any kind of correlation with the recession.
If you're going to do single family homes, you're going to do B type properties. I would say never buy a C type property if you can help it, because you're talking about buying in a depressed environment, and that's going to give you the highest in terms of management cost to support. So you might be getting good rent. I'll give you an example, a personal example. I had a 4-unit that gave me a little over $2,500 a month in positive cash flow, but it was in a C neighborhood. So yeah, while I, made the money each month, it was very high maintenance. I had a property management company running it, and they were charging me 8%. But then property management has a business model that's completely diametrically opposed to that of an investor, where they hit you with these fees. Every dispatch was $50. Every change of a light bulb, for example, cost me money, and it was a headache. People being called out to the property because of a tenant that's in a bad relationship. Those are the kinds of headaches that I didn't want to deal with. So if you're going to do those single family properties, you got to do them in Class B neighborhoods. That's bread and butter. That's the middle of the road, blue collar, white collar, whatever you want to call it. It's the kinds of properties that people want to live in, and that's what you really want to stay in as much as possible.
And George, kind of to go a little bit on what Richard said, I listened to several fairly large investors in the last few years, and we're talking thousands of units investors. And the way that they look at this is the units exist and there's a need for all of them. It's just a matter of who goes where. So if you have A through D properties, in some places there's F properties and you don't want to go there, but some people might. What happens is during a recession or any turn of the economy, people are going to shift sections to where they need to go. So it's not that there's always going to be a demand for A properties. People who can't afford to stay in A properties during recession are going to move to B. And people who can't afford to move to B or stay in B are going to move to C, and C goes down. And it's just this cyclical. The only difference is no one is ever going to go from a D property to an A property unless they hit the lottery. And we know what happens with that kind of influx of money. Usually it doesn't turn out too well. So the assets are allocated, they're all there, they're fixed, but people are going to flow between the asset classes. And in a recession, everyone shifts down, or typically they shift down, which is why most investors in this part, exactly to echo Richard's point, are going to stay away from A properties, because B is where all of the A's are going to go when things start turning. B will always have a place in the world. C, you're not going to take someone from an A property and put them into a C property. They're all going to come down, and then you're going to have a very solid payer base and tenant base in a B property, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Kind of with the shift downwards, and I guess from a risk reward perspective, again, Richard, it seems like you were going a lot of risk and doing a lot of overhead to kind of get through that. And so, yeah, I understand where you're coming from B being the middle ground. So appreciate both your insights. Thank you.
Yeah, Chris, do you have any input on that? I know you have C and B properties.
You think C?
Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, technically this area would be considered like a marginal CB, but I know you have other ones and you had them up north that would be B plus, and the place that you were looking, well, depending on the condition of it, would be, I guess, for New Jersey, probably B as well. What's your experience with that?
Well, I mean, when I got into real estate, I mean, it was the stupid stuff that you heard, all your life, which was location, location, location. So, I specifically steered away from, where I could find place. I even had people bring me houses that they wanted me to buy that I would not buy because I just did not like the location. I just didn't want to deal with that. And, kind of like what Richard was saying, you just know it's going to be a headache. And so, specifically try to find great neighborhoods, good environments for, where close to grocery stores. I think if you find places that are convenient that people want to be in, there's restaurants or, what have you around. If it's a, I mean, that's what makes a depressed area when none of that's around, I think. But, looking for those neighborhoods is really, I think the key. I mean, kind of thing. I wouldn't buy anywhere that is somewhere that's far off the beaten path, hard for people to get to jobs, get to roads and things like that.
That's a really good point. And then you have the aspect of people who have like a destination that is off the beaten path, but there's a reason people go there, like a ski town or like a resort town, something like that. And then you get into a different style of rental, which those things seem to still do well during the previous recessions, especially during COVID. Who would have ever thought the Poconos and HOAs would be, exploding like they are now because people want to get out of cities?
Yeah, I know. I actually literally was just at a meeting this morning with a real estate. Well, he's a restaurant owner / he owns a lot. He's into a lot of things, and he's putting up a 260 unit townhome, and he's already contacted hospitals. the two major hospitals that are here, because he has a whole section that he's courting the hospitals to put in, another facility there, and he wants them to pay for it up front. I was like, man, you got some guts. They're like, well, we're not interested in putting in this is right here up in the Poconos, right on 611. He's like, listen, I'll give you the piece of property now for $6 million, but you wait 3 months and I break ground like you want me to do, because they're like, if you don't break ground, we're not interested. He goes, the price is going to $8 million. And I'm not kidding. I'm like, wow, that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, it's still exploding. I mean, this guy thinks it's going to continue to go in the Poconos.
Yeah, it's very sought after. It's the next Lehigh Valley, just like that, and all the coal towns.
Yeah, and he's putting up a big hotel too. That's his goal. It's going to be a what do they call those? Boutique hotels. He's like, it's not going to be like anything around here. I'm like, well, do you think people are coming? He goes, the New Yorkers are here. They'll go in it. I'm like, you're probably right.
Everything's relative. The next section is on things to avoid. Now, this is in no way, shape, or form advice to not invest in places, because again, if you have a place that makes sense, or if you have an asset that you could buy for personal use that you could offset some expenses by renting it out, it's very, very subjective to everybody's personal investment goals. But in general, when it comes to recessions, the things people do less, the general public, is they go on less vacations, they stay in less hotels, and they buy less things. So in general, having homes or investments geared toward those things historically won't provide the same kind of returns or security as places where people need to live. However, there are some people who've made absolute killing in custom boutique style properties like Chris was just talking about, where you have a very customized living for a certain type of person. So during COVID, we thought people would stop vacationing less. Well, they did, because they couldn't really get places. But look what it's done. Private travel, seclusion travel, Uber, things like that, delivery services. It's flourished an entire new portion of the economy that we never even thought would exist. So this is all presented with, in general, these kinds of things people do less in an economy, but we're seeing that people are very creative, and it's always changing. Retail can also be risky, because you never really know when that store, that product is going to be needed. And if you have a retail tenants, keep that in mind. So this is a good quote by Baron Rothschild. This is something that Warren Buffett says all the time, if you guys follow him. The best time is to buy when there's blood in the streets. Not meant to be negative, but don't let a good crisis go to waste is another way of saying this. This is the kind of thing that investors should be looking for. You're always looking for a deal. A deal doesn't come because there's a cheap house for sale. A deal comes because you could take something and either force equity and make it more valuable than when you bought it. Now, in a recession, by definition, is things tend to lose value, or things tend to change the demand. So as an investor, you should be all over educating yourself about the recession, what it means, and looking for opportunities. People will crucify you for it, but they're not the ones who are going to do the work to try and turn that, dilapidated hotel in the Poconos where the owners are in jail into something cool that is needed. But if you are that guy, there's always going to be haters. There's always going to be people who are not liking what you're doing. But that's where the money is made, and that's where the good deals are. So recessions are a great time to scoop up the properties in primary markets and secondary, tertiary markets where people may not be up to speed on things yet. Not to take advantage of people, but if you're helping someone out of their situation at the price that they want, everybody's happy. You just get a huge upside because you're willing to put the work in that someone else wasn't. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that?
Just a comment with with COVID, we've seen a lot of people work from home, and therefore people moving into more costly houses is not going to happen, but people working from their home instead of going into the office is I think shoring up the housing sector where, you know, people don't want to move out. They want to live in a house without commuting or whatever. I don't know. It's just a very random thought, and it didn't come out that good anyways.
No, and I think you're onto something though, and it also created a opposite reaction in the retail and office space section. Think about all these office buildings where people were expected to be every day that are no longer required to be.
Absolutely. When the place I was working in New Jersey, they closed the office up, so they totally shut it down.
Yep. And now you have all these big industrial buildings where there were a few thousand people working at a time that need a new home and a new purpose. That's going to be a very creative commercial use of property. And would love to have a conversation and brainstorm ideas with everybody about that, because there is a huge opportunity for repurposing office space, because it is out there for pennies on the dollar. And I think that's a meetup in itself, or a mastermind, or a, get together at a bar one night to just talk ideas, because the fact that people are staying home because of COVID, it's shown that your job can be done remotely, and most of the time better and for a cheaper price. There's all these buildings out there that need to be used, and all these commercial owners with tenants who are no longer there. There's a use for these things. There has to be, and whoever can find it could have the next big idea. So just kind of think about that, and let's talk more, but that's a good idea. So the forecast, we want to take this link. I don't have it up here. The housing market, we're talking just about single family housing market. This is expected to slowly cool, and we're talking about Eastern Pennsylvania now, slowly cool over the next few months. It's not going to be a crash. It's not going to be a dead drop where you can start buying everything pennies on the dollar, purely because of the demand. There will always be someone to buy a house with an interest rate of 10%. There's people buying cars right now with interest rates higher than credit cards because they can't get the money from anyone else. There will always be someone out there to buy a house. The difference is there's also people out there right now who are okay with renting, and they'd rather rent than pay 10% for a house interest rate. So there's going to come an equilibrium at some point, and the experts, I say in quotations, in residential real estate feel that time is about 1 year to 2 years from now, where we're going to finally meet equilibrium. So that's going to do a few things. When equilibrium happens, the demand's gone. Sellers no longer have the edge on everything. And us as real estate investors who own property, it might not be very easy to get rid of the things you want to get rid of. However, if you're a real estate investor who followed the 4 principles in the beginning, and you analyze deals, you found them, and you save capital, you could take advantage of some pretty good opportunities that other people mismanaged. Not taking advantage of them, but maybe they're just trying to get out of the game. Maybe they're moving on or investing in other things. And if the numbers work, the numbers work. Again, it's business, it's not personal. And when it comes to buying things here, this article is a very, very good explanation of the real estate market from a residential housing perspective. It doesn't get really into multifamily, because then you start touching commercial and a lot of other variables. But single family rentals, follow this link. Very, very good article. These are the references for the slideshow. I put a lot of work into the presentation. It's not MLA formatted. It should be, but these are the references if you want to check them out. So does anybody have any questions or whatnot for me on the stuff that we presented?
I had a comment. I heard this morning on the radio that the Fed plans on raising the interest rate 0.5% per month for the foreseeable future. So
up to 50 basis points. And that turns out to be between 2.5% to 3% and that's not directly equating to what we think of as an interest rate. So that's not going from 5 to 7.5%. The Fed has the base rates, and then everything else trickles down from that. So we will start to see residential real estate interest rates for like owner occupants in the 6 to 7% normally, and it's expected to go as high as 8 to 10. So Rich, you're up in Ohio. What kind of rates are you seeing out that way? Are you still in the 5s or are you in the 6s yet?
Oh, we're still in the 5s.
Okay.
I mean, you know, it's like 5.5.
We just had a commercial quote 2 days ago. This is a Lehigh Valley branch. 4.5 for a commercial, which is really, really good. However, 4.5 for a commercial is fixed only for a period of 5 years. And then no commercial lender is going to extend their fixed rate past 5 years. At that point, they renegotiate to whatever is prime. So you can go from 4.5 where your numbers work to 12 if things really take off and the Fed decides to keep, increasing the rate. That could do a little bit of a number on your cash flow. So if you're going to buy a residential fixed, that's different. Having a 5.5% interest rate fixed for 30 years is really not that bad compared to things in history. I mean, I'm sure some of you guys here have experienced interest rates in the teens.
My first house was 15% in 1978.
Yeah. Yep. So, I mean, the Fed is going to keep increasing the rate, and it has to, because it has to pump the brakes on this machine that's just been rolling like a train without brakes since COVID started. They pump so much money into the economy. There's so much money out there unaccounted for, just doing whatever it's doing, that they have to control it somehow. And it's freaking a lot of people out because they're uneducated. They don't realize that, a $15 an hour job demand means the price of groceries and the price of commodities go up, which means the price of all the other stuff the store has to have goes up, which means this. And then the gas price on top of it, fuel in general. The trickle down of this is going to be very interesting on a level that we haven't seen before. And despite all that, the Fed still has to raise interest rates or it's going to go out of control. So anybody have any comments or questions on that side of it?
Well, I think the problem is the Fed doesn't allow enough time between interest rate increases to truly gauge what the market's doing. I mean, they raised it twice already this year. Yeah.
Because they created legislation that's allowing them to change it more frequently than in the past. And they did it as quickly as they were legally allowed to, but now they've changed the frequency in which they're even allowed to do that.
Yeah, but see, therein lies the problem. The market moves slowly, and they're going to affect make the changes to those rates in such a way as if they're going to fix things quickly, and I don't think that it has ever happened that way.
One of the things that I find very captivating, and I'm not sure if you've noticed it, but you can tell a lot by what big companies do. Now, Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway, they're in the business of buying businesses, not necessarily in the real estate business. But when you have companies like Blackstone and Amazon, specifically Amazon, just 2 weeks ago, they came out and Amazon is buying developments in towns. They're pulling their money out of non-tangible assets like stocks, and they're putting it literally into real estate. Now, why would they be doing that if they were not totally sure of the future of the stock market? Like, to me, that's a huge flag, and it also is a huge competitor. They're not going to come and buy up Allentown, but they might. There's towns out there that are ready, willing, and able to be the next host for the Tesla Gigafactory. And what does that do to that town? These people and these companies are investing heavily in real estate and not other places They still are investing other places. They're shifting gears to investing in real estate, which should be a huge flag to everybody else out there. And, I've become super passionate about this stuff over the last few years, just like everybody on here has. So I'm preaching to the choir. But even if you buy something right now that's at market value, history has shown time and time again, and right now, almost everyone out there is agreeing that real estate is the most stable and long-term investment. It's hard to argue with. Now, there could be this crazy outlying thing, or the aliens could come in and, do all this wild stuff that changes the world, but that can happen anywhere at any time. The facts are, this is still the best investment anybody could reasonably make. The times are changing. The recession's here, regardless of what the reason is for it. Knowing about it, educating yourself on what a recession is and what to do with your own money and education is the best thing you could do. So that's kind of my soapbox. I could talk all day about it. I'd love to. I think we all need to get together and actually do these things in person one day soon. But I'd love to bring up anything else you guys want to talk about today.
I got a question. I got a question
Chris?
for you guys.
Yep.
When I got into investing, I was with a group. This was years ago, and one of the things is about this LLC thing, because Richard, you were talking about it. You should really start one. I never did. Everything that I've ever bought and sold and did was, just by myself with my social security number, right? So the thing that we learned back then is that LLCs don't really protect you. If the good law firm wants to get through to you, they're going to get you. So if one of your tenants is going to sue you, they're going to sue you. They're going to get you. So we opened.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I wanted to comment on that statement because I've heard.
Well, yeah, I'm almost done. Then I want you to please.
I'm sorry.
So what we did, or I did, the people that were in that group was do personal liability insurance. So I have a couple $1 million, and I have I have property that's commercial, and I have property that's not commercial. So I have two personal liability policies, one commercial, one not. So I'm kind of double protected, but protected in each way. So it's kind of money that's thrown out to the wind at some level, but it's just security blanket that's there to cover me for a couple $1 million. So if I get sued, that's what we did. So what are your thoughts?
Okay, well, I think that it's definitely important for you to have some protection. So I applaud you for doing at least something. Most investors don't do anything. They just invest in their own name and wing it. And usually you don't get sued. It's a possibility that you wouldn't be, right? More than likely you're not going to be. But that said, I would say this in terms of an entity, an LLC or corporation, what have you. Okay, it's only as good as the charter of that LLC or that corporation. In other words, if you go to LegalZoom and you got your LLC and think you're okay and you're protected and you're a single member, well, you're not, because a single member LLC is basically you're just a DBA, doing business as, but you're from a tax perspective, you're held personally, right? But if the LLC is done outside of LegalZoom and done properly with the the way that it should be with a legitimate, charter and multiple members that are not related, right? Then you have a genuine entity that can protect you from civil liabilities on a personal level. Okay, it's kind of like the difference between having a C corporation versus an LLC. You're better off with a C corporation. I have two. And then what you want to do is you want to have your LLCs flow up. Now, all that said, just understand something. If you remember Dodd-Frank, right?
Yep.
Let me give you an idea of the potential risks that are involved. One of the things that I'm starting to get into is leases with an option to buy. Okay. And just so you know, when Dodd-Frank was instituted back in, I think it was 2010, 2008, no, 2008, because that's when we had the crash. So between 2008, 2010, we had Dodd-Frank. In Dodd-Frank, there are some very severe penalties if you don't have or don't set things up right, or if the tenant in your unit decides that they want to try and get back at you by doing something, by whatever the case may be. One of the rules, though, is that in a lease option, for example, you cannot refer to that tenant as a lease purchaser. Okay, this is just language. That's all we're talking about. Just language.
Yeah.
Certain words in the lease you can't use. That's why when Dodd-Frank was instituted, it separated the lease from the option. Okay, it used to be. Remember, we used to do way back when the rent to own.
Yep.
And it was all in one contract, right? You can't do that anymore. That's a violation of Dodd-Frank. But even if you don't, one of the penalties is if you, and there are lawyers out there, just so you know, there are lawyers, law firms out there looking for low-hanging fruit specifically for Dodd-Frank violations. Because if you have a Dodd-Frank violation, you could be responsible for not only paying that tenant all the monies that they paid to you, but also up to 3 years, whether they live there or not.
Yeah. Yeah. My lawyer has made me aware of some those stupid. I don't even understand
It's some
why.
crazy.
Why? Why would they write that in? What were they thinking? Like, they obviously weren't.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure what the logic was behind that as to
None.
why they did it that way, but you know, it's another attempt at, you know, I mean, of course, there are parties that are more for business and there are parties that are more for you know, tenants or what have you.
Right.
But when they did that, and here's the thing, is if you say, for example, commit a Dodd-Frank violation and you got a Legal Doom LLC and you have and even with liability insurance, for example, right? You could find yourself in a position to having to defend not only your business, but yourself from, you know, a frivolous lawsuit. Because remember, every lawsuit means that you got to defend against it. You got 30
Sure.
days to respond to a civil action. Well, you got to pay the attorney, whether there's any reality to it or not.
Yep. Money in
Right?
the toilet.
You got to pay for it. Yeah. So I'm with you 100%. I think you did the right thing in terms of having some protection in place, and that's really good. I would say make sure that you not know what you're covered for, but know what you're not covered for. And if you're not covered for a violation of the law, well, then that's not coverage, right?
Right. Sure.
So,
Sure.
So yeah. So I tend to believe that, and I think that it's historically accurate to believe this, is that the less you have in your own personal name, the better off you are. Because when an attorney goes and does an asset search on you, if they can't find anything, then they ain't gonna sue you. You're uncollectible. You're not worth their time.
Well, that's true. Yeah, that's what's wrong with this country. Lawyers.
Yeah,
Chris,
yeah.
a lot of
tort law.
a lot
That's the
of
problem with the country.
a lot of investors have migrated towards the LLC structure purely for the reason that Richard was just talking. There's been a shift in buying things in your personal name, mainly because it's not very scalable. If you get up to about $1 million in debt in your personal name, or 10 units, I believe the banks start to have underwriting issues with it. So the LLC is the natural way.
It's conforming loans.
Right.
You can have up to 4 conforming loans, what's called conforming loans in your name.
I ran into it.
After that, it gets created. Yeah.
But when you get into like a C Corp, Richard, like you have, there's other limitations with that, but it allows a lot of anonymity. Is that how you say it? Anonymous? I don't even know what the word is. Don't laugh at me. I learned good.
That's okay. Anonymity.
And yeah, there you go. Isn't that the thing under the sea? They allow lots of protection for you because it is its own entity, and you are just a person helping to manage this entity. You're no longer the only pass through. When you have an LLC that shows up on your personal tax return, that is a huge flag. And I say that as a huge hypocrite because we have several, and all of us do on the call. But sometimes certain LLCs are appropriate, and other corporations are appropriate for other things. So I guess to answer your
Right,
question,
right.
it all depends on what you want to do, but there's no ultimate protection from anything, because if you are personally negligent, I mean, they can come after you because you look funny, and look at this whole
Well,
John
you're
Depp
right.
thing, right?
Well, unfortunately, we live in an environment where we have people within the realm of law enforcement, if I can call it that don't enforce the laws as they are written in the book.
Exactly.
You
Even
got
judges.
that problem to deal with first. Yeah. You got these activists,
I've been
judges,
in front of judges.
prosecutors.
Yeah. I've been in front of judges
Yeah,
with tenants and couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe what I was being told. Just looked at them like, what?
Oh, don't get Richard started on judges. Richard
No,
loves.
don't get me started on that. I've had battles with magistrates, man, here in PA. Okay, let me tell you, I have even written or reported a magistrate for his behavior. Of course, it didn't go anywhere, and I didn't expect it to. But I wanted to put something on the record that
Right.
Yeah, problem with judges.
Yeah. But you're absolutely right. But just make sure that when you set up, I'm going to go over this next month, the next meetup. We're going to be talking about estate planning. I am a student or attended the J. Mitten course on estate planning, asset protection, and tax strategies. That's a $10,000 course. I didn't pay that, of course, but I did get the chance to take it. I do have all the material, and I want to talk about how to set your business up where you have a number of LLCs. Because what I'm doing now, I'm doing management investment for capital investors, people that got money that they want to place, but they don't want to deal with the whole idea of being a landlord. Well, that's what I do. Is I will take their money, they place their money with me, and then I will do all the investment and managing the properties and everything for them, and they get a return. So
I like that. That's nice.
So that's an easier way of doing things, in my opinion, and it gives the potential investor an opportunity to be able to just sit back and collect the money on this lucrative idea called real estate. But yeah, next month I'll be doing a layered approach. I'll be showing you where a LLC is appropriate, where a corporation is appropriate, where it should probably be, why you should register your company within the state or county that you reside or where you're operating out of, and other things along those lines, including I'll talk a little bit about trusts. I'll talk a little bit about personal estate planning versus corporate estate planning. I'll hit on all those topics, and so I got a month to put it together, and it certainly will be worth your while.
Yeah, I'm interested in that. No doubt. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything else they'd like to talk about today? I know it's kind of a long-winded discussion, but it usually turns into just a conversation with a little bit of content. We have a lot of cool ideas, a lot of people that are going to be coming on here in the future. This is one of the smaller calls. Chris, we talked about this. There was some we've had 20, 25 guys on the call. Sometimes it's 4 or 5. Other times it's just been Richard and I talking about airplanes because nobody calls. But
that's only happened once. Okay.
Hey, listen, I enjoyed it. But we're
yeah, but I want to know. I got to get into a cockpit so I can get my profile picture like you guys got.
I can help it. We can do that.
That's what I want.
We're a bunch of tool bags. That's what it is.
Yeah. Well, I think it's been a great call. We're coming up on the half hour. I think it's been a great call, Matt. I think that presentation was outstanding. It was very well done. Thank you.
Sure thing. I love doing it. But we'll send an email recap out, and we'll get the next one going. Richard, at estate planning is really a huge topic that I'm looking forward to, because you can always refine that, and you really should at least once a year, refine your paperwork, because shit happens, and you want to make sure that it's not a burden.
And yeah, and if you get your legal documentation from Legal Doom or from one of the other, what was it, the Law Depot, those websites, you have to either know how to modify them yourselves to make them less generic and specific to your particular model of business, or you got to have an attorney to do it for you. So.
Awesome.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for the call. A lot of really good insights, and looking forward to hearing the estate planning part. That's a fun thing to talk about. At least for me. Maybe sometimes it's boring for other people, but for me it's fun.
George, I appreciate it. You're always calling in. You're always on the call, and you bring a unique side of it too. So we'd like to have you. I know you're in kind of the a different sector of real estate investing through the Merrill Lynch and the financial end. So I'd like to get you on as well. Everybody has a little bit to bring, and Chris has a lot of experience. He's been doing this a ton of times, and I just like having everybody here to collaborate. You never know how we could connect. So I appreciate you taking your lunch hour.
Yeah, of
Sounds
course.
good.
Thanks. And yeah, happy to talk.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Good. Thanks,
Later.
guys.
Have a good weekend and good holiday if we don't talk.
Sounds good. You too.
See you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you very much,
Take
guys.
care, everyone.